Hey guys, Dr. Decks here. Thank you for coming to our YouTube channel, and I really appreciate you watching this video. Today I want to talk to you about 5 common mistakes that deck builders make. So if you get something from this video, I would appreciate it if you'd click that subscribe button and hit the bell icon if you want to be notified every time we're putting out new content. Alright, number 1. Probably one of the most common mistakes you can make when building a deck is not having a plan, not being organized. If you don't know where your footings go, or you're setting up a team to dig, if you can't have a plan of where your footings go, how your joists are built, how your posts need to go, nobody's going to know what's up. So I do this a lot on the fly. I will sometimes I won't have my plan, but I'll still have to sketch something out on a folder or on a piece of paper just to clarify where exactly those footings are going to go. It's one of the most common mistakes that you can do is not have a properly orchestrated plan, so I always recommend spending the time to put that in action. Number 2, it is in my opinion that there's a lot of decks that have undersized footings. So footings are one of the most important parts of building a deck. If you don't have the proper size footing, now this varies from location to location, topography, elevation, where you are in the continental US or in North America. If you're in Canada, you're using helical piles to build your deck with. I've seen a lot of people use a method I use, not digging the footings deep enough, and then they get frost heave, so the footings expand, the ground freezes and the footings heave. Basically the deck just lifts and it just destroys it, rips it right off the side of the house. So depending on where you live will determine the size of your footing. Like I was saying earlier, if you have an engineer check your math so that they can calculate how big the size of your footings need to be. Sometimes where I live, in our topography, I build a square footing. Our frost depth is not really deep, so I can build a footing, or I can dig a footing, maybe 12 inches deep, sometimes 16, sometimes 24, and that could be 12 by 12 by 12, 16 by 16 by 16, 24 by 24 by 24, or any combination of those depending on how the math calculates out. I'm not a mathematician. I don't have a license to give out that kind of information, so you don't ask me, go ask your engineer what you think that those footing sizes can be. Yes, it's going to cost you some money, but don't you want to know for sure that the loads that you're calculating for that deck are going to be able to be suspended by the part that goes in the ground? All right, so that's my second tip, is make sure your footings are properly sized. Number 3, common mistake that a lot of deck builders make is they don't use the proper size framing. If you don't know your lumber spans, if you don't know how far a 2x8 is going to span from the house to a beam, you should really check with a professional engineer to help you with that information. I can't stress enough, there are span charts on the internet that you can go look up. If you know what you're doing, you can say, okay, this joist, this many inches on center with this load coming from the house, and then if you take the tributary load of that, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to bore you with all the information. But if you don't know that stuff, then it's, again, wise to consult an engineer. There are engineers out there that will do this for a reasonable rate and not charge you thousands of dollars. You just got to find the right guy. But it's really important that you make sure that your joists are going to span in between your beams a certain length so that you don't have a lot of bounce in the deck, or that you're not overspanning your joists and then they end up sagging over the future because you took them out too far and now they're sagging in the middle. So proper size framing, beams, that goes for your beams, your posts, your beams, and your joists all need to be sized either because you know what you're doing or because you checked with an engineer or your local building code to find out that and make sure that you have it done right. Here's tip number 4. This is probably one of the most important parts of a deck that I see constantly. Every year people are dying from this. Improper attachment to the house. If you don't attach your ledger properly to the house, the deck can fail. The biggest problem, the reason this happens, because you have a deck built, there's the house. Ledger is attached to the house, joists come out, there's a beam and post right here. You have a party with a bunch of people on it, there's something going on downstairs, everybody in the party runs to the end of the deck and stops, deck pulls away from the house, does this, everybody falls and breaks their back and gets killed or whatever, or gets injured. It happens every year from improper techniques, well, I'm going to say it, improper flashing, which is another topic, and I'm probably not going to touch on that today. But improper installation of your deck ledger to your house is one of the most common mistakes and one of the most dangerous mistakes that you can make. Again, check with your local building codes, consult an engineer if you need to, hire a professional if you're not sure what to do. But it's a really important step is when you hang a ledger on the house, how many fasteners do you need? Check Fasten Master. They're a great resource. Go to fastenmaster.com. There's schedules and charts on how many fasteners you need, but it also depends on the sizing of your deck, which we just talked about, and how much loading you have on it, and so on and so forth, to make sure you're putting the proper amount of fasteners in your ledger. On top of that, you're also probably going to need to add some lateral tension support as well. So Fasten Master also makes a bracket for that. So does Simpson. So you can put a certain type of bracket that helps keep the deck from pulling away from the house, because you're either attaching to the inside floor joist of the house, or you're attaching to the mud sill or the sill plate between where the floors meet and the bottom floor beats the top floor. There's usually a sill plate right there. And if you're screwing into that with these brackets, then you're good to go, because what you're doing is, here's the house, here's the joist, here's the bracket, and the bracket attaches to the joist, and then it keeps the deck from pulling away from the house. So a certain amount of those are required for every deck that we build to code. So again, check your local code, but that's another important thing to make sure that you have a proper ledger attachment to your house. Tip number 5. Okay, this one has to do with when you're laying your decking. So if you don't have your joists spaced properly, then your decking, especially if you're using a composite or a PVC deck board, if you don't have proper spacing, your decking might do this. It's like you're out on a river or a boat or something. It's going like this. Always check with the manufacturer to see what the allowable joist span is. Traditionally, on a PVC or a composite deck, it's 16 inches on center or less will be good for installing your decking. Some people don't feel that's enough, so they'll squeeze their joist together to 12 inches on center, which is more of a commercial rating. Or if you're going to put your deck boards on a 45, you need to put your joist spacing down to 12 inches. So just a common mistake I've seen a lot when I'm tearing down old decks. I've torn down old composite decks, and they're 18 inches on center, and the decking goes like this in between the joists. And the only way to really improve on that is bring your joist spacing tighter together. I'm going to give you a 6th common mistake that I just saw on a project, and I didn't point it out on a video on our Instagram page, but I see this a lot, is improper blocking for your rail support. If you're using an aluminum rail system, always put solid blocking in between your joist space, so that when you put your post in and you put your legs down, you have something super solid to attach to. I don't use flat blocking like 2x8s or 2x4s or whatever. I'm always using a 4x4 or 4x6 or even a 4x8 if I have to get the support that I need, and then I'm locking it into both joists and through the rim to make sure that block is solid, so that when I mount my post, it's nice and sturdy. All right, guys, so that's 5 common mistakes, actually 6, but we'll say 5 common mistakes that you can make when building a deck. I hope you learned something from that. I hope you take these tips and use them and implement them in your own builds. I really appreciate you watching today. If you don't mind, click that subscribe button and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we're putting out future updates. Thank you very much. Have a great day.